Faces of Engineering, Perspectives of Engineering session. My name is Jane. I'm a water and wastewater engineer with a small consulting company in Godrich. Anyone know where Godrich is?
Yeah.
Yes. Prettiest town in the Commonwealth, I like to point out whenever I have the chance. The Queen decreed so. And I'm here for a number of reasons. But one reason is, a few weeks ago I went back to my high school, and it hadn't changed a whole lot. But I stood in front of a class of bright, smiling 16 and 17-year-olds, and I asked, what are engineers? What do engineers do? And I admitted that when I was in high school I had no idea, except that if you wanted to be one you had to take a particular math course. And what they told me is they said, engineers are builders, engineers are mechanics. They said, I've got a brother, he's in engineering. And I said, what does your brother do? And they said, a lot of work. And I said, no, engineers are not, we're not bridge builders, we're not building designers, we're not these mad scientists out there, we're not mechanics, we're problem solvers. And I said, can any of you think of some problems? And they all kind of stared at me. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, okay, come on, let's think of some problems. And they started coming up with these ideas, and they said, we've got issues with climate change, and we've got environmental problems. And they said, I'm interested in some social things. We've got economic inequality. We've got gender inequality. And I said, yeah. And I said, what do you think engineers do? And I said, engineers solve problems. And this was something they'd never heard before, and it wasn't something I heard in high school. And I think it's something that everyone needs to hear, that engineers, we're not just these robotic people clicking away at our calculators. We're people out there solving real problems that people have. And that's what makes me excited about this session, that we're all here because we all have an idea of what the profession really is and what value we bring to society. So welcome to all of you. And I hope that you really do share my excitement in this, because it's a pretty exciting time, I think, for engineering, for us to think about who we are and where we're going. So to help us in this exploration, we've invited 3 excellent guests. We've got Ian Cloro. He's here from Hatch, although he is recently a Hatch employee. Sorry? Very, very recent. We've got Mary Wells, and she's from the University of Waterloo, and she's their Outreach Dean. I'm not probably saying the title, Associate Dean of Outreach. So she wears sort of the academic hat. And then we've got Theresa Erskine from Monroe, and she also wears the Ontario Association of Professional Engineers, OSPE, hat. Sorry, my memory is not good when it comes to names or associations. Yeah, so they each come with a unique perspective, and I want each of you, before we go into this session, to think about what hat you're wearing. So whether it's the student hat, whether it's the recent graduate hat, whether it's the industry hat, whether it's a combination of hats, whether it's none of those hats. Think about that, and be sure to share that perspective as we go through this workshop. So with that, actually, I have the really easy job of turning things over to Tom. Did you want to do?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick little intro.
Okay, so we'll have each of them actually stand up and do a quick intro to you, so you know who they are and what they're all about. So did we decide on the order, reverse alphabetical last name by?
My name's Ian Caro. As you mentioned, I'm from Hatch. I'm the Global Director of Marketing for Hatch, and I've actually just joined Hatch back in November. So I'm still learning about engineering as a domain. Before I worked for Hatch, I was with Deloitte Consulting in the US for 13 years, running marketing for a management consulting firm. So a lot of the same kind of dynamics that happen in a professional services firm, going from consulting to engineering, but obviously different kind of domain. So we're here to help you guys kind of think about what your profession is, what its faces to the outside world, whether that's the general public or to the companies that you're trying to sell your services to, or even your families. I mean, my wife does not know what I do for a living. She hasn't known for 15 years what I do for a living. So hopefully we can help you go home and at least tell your families what you do for a living.
Hi everybody, I'm Mary Wells. I'm a materials engineer by training, and I'm also a professor in mechanical and mechatronics engineering at the University of Waterloo, as well as being the Associate Dean for Outreach. So I really resonate with some of the things Jane said in terms of the perception of engineering in our society. If we look at sort of the body of engineering, the kind of students we attract in, it's not really that diverse. For example, we still may have about 16% women that are studying engineering. And that sort of splits, so there's quite a few women that are studying things like environmental engineering, bio-related engineering, and chemical engineering, sort of 30 to 40%. But then if you look at the department I'm in, mechanical engineering, we've only got 8% women in it. Electrical engineering, 8%. Computer engineering, 8%. So it really splits in terms of what women are choosing. So it's, in terms of the diversity of the profession, I think we've really got a long way to go in terms of attracting other people into it. And part of the reason I hear from young women is, well, they want to do things where they're helping other people, helping the world, and serving things. So that's why they are very much attracted to things like medicine. And when I think about the profession of engineering, I think it is a serving profession, but it's just that the public doesn't get that message. And so, you know, from what Jane was saying, when you talk to high school students, and, you know, we run a lot of sort of summer camps for kids to come in, and if you ask those kids when they first come in, why don't you draw a picture of what an engineer does? Invariably, they draw a person that is not working with other people, but is working with tools. So they may draw a person fixing a car, building a bridge, but invariably it's male, it's white, and they're all by themselves working with these tools. So they're not working in teams with other people. And this is one of the big misconceptions about engineering, I think. And so there's a number of them. Engineers work in isolation, they're working on a computer by themselves. You know, the whole image of Dilbert, I think, is really what the view of an engineer is, kind of nerdy and introverted and things like that. The perception that they're not good communicators. In fact, I've had a couple of students tell me their guidance counselors have advised them, if they're not good at English, then the profession they should be going into is engineering, because engineers don't need to communicate. I mean, that's just totally the wrong message. So I think that as a result, we do have a lot of people that are very bright in math and science, maybe a little bit more introverted, that go into the profession. And as a result, as professionals, they may not feel comfortable engaging the public in terms of you know, talking to the media and things like this. And so when you look at many of the challenges they're facing as climate change and stuff, very rarely do you get the opinion of an engineer. And I'm not sure why that is. If it's the engineers sort of back off and say, well, I don't have the skill set to communicate effectively. You know, often engineers will talk in very great sort of depth technically, and it's difficult for the general public to understand that. So I think we need to teach our engineers ways to talk to the lay people effectively so they can develop a face with the public. The last point I want to make is I think that one of the other things is when you look at all the engineering around us, we've got clean water, we've got safe buildings, this is all embedded. We've got electrification, this is all embedded around us, and people tend to take it for granted, especially people that are growing up in the developed world. If you look at kids that are growing up in third world countries, many of them do aspire to become scientists and engineers. If you look at our youth here, the majority don't want to go towards engineering and science, and that's another major challenge we face, is inspiring that younger generation to want to become science engineers, and it is a great profession to go into. And it's because we sort of take it for granted, and we don't see the value of what engineers can add to our society. So just a couple of things to think about as we'll move through these exercises.
Morning. My name is Theresa Erskine. I'm a registered mechanical engineer. I've got a varied background. I first started out in consulting engineering, and then went into working for several manufacturing firms, done a variety of things. I switched over to marketing about 10 years into my career, and I've actually never gone back. I now work for an infrastructure company, Monroe Limited, and we sell our products to and so I have and I've sold to engineers over the years, so I have an understanding of kind of what they're like. And the perceptions that generally the public has of engineers is a lot of what I see. And I think we have a lot to do in ourselves to change that perception. And we can all do that perception one at a time. And so I'm looking forward to some of the discussions here about that. I'm also on the board of directors of the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers. which is the advocacy body, Voice of Ontario's engineers. We represent engineers. Professional Engineers Ontario is the regulatory body. With FOSPI, I'm active in doing a couple of programs with them. One is in helping internationally trained engineers transition to the Ontario workplace through several courses that we do, and also another one which helps internationally trained engineers transition to the green economy. So I've had to wear a number of hats throughout my career. I've sat in front of a drafting board trying to figure out how to design. That was a long time ago. We don't sit in front of drafting boards anymore. But trying to figure out how to design something mechanical, and walked into a manufacturing space to try and get that design implemented. And now a lot of what I do is trying to convince engineers of new ways to do things. So looking forward to the discussion too. Thanks.
Okay.
Perfect. So my job is incredibly easy at this point. And I'm going to hand things over to Tom Antonio. He's here from Grip Limited, which is an advertising agency right here in Toronto. I think he's a generally nice guy from my first impressions this morning. So prepare yourselves for a really exciting workshop. I know a few of you. I've been running around making sure everyone knows how awesome this is going to be. And you're not going to be let down if I promised you lots of big things. So here's Tom. Thank you. Warm welcome to him.
Okay, so my name's Tom, and I'm not an engineer. But my brother's an engineer. So that makes me totally qualified to make terrible assumptions and generalizations about your industry and what you guys do on a daily basis. So I work for a company called Grip, and Jane said, yeah, we're an advertising agency. And like your industry, that's the easiest way to tell people what we do. But we don't just do advertising. I'm not an advertising guy. I was going to be an architect. That was my original plan. And when I went to school way back when, and yes, Theresa, drafting boards were in my world way back then, architecture sucked. It was terrible. The industry was terrible. The economy was terrible. And I said, you know what? I don't know if I could spend 5 years doing this and then another 5 years to get my stamp and then maybe start to make a living 5 years after that. So I switched to art college and was lucky enough to find something that I love to do. And at Grip, I'm one of the partners. But I run the brand design side. So I help a lot of people develop brands. I help a lot of people change the brands. I help a lot of people do things with their brands that they hadn't thought they could do. And here's a bunch of people that we do stuff for. Most people have no idea who Grip is, but they know the stuff that we do for a lot of these people. So I'm not going to sell you advertising. That's not why I'm here. We have a process. It's a 107-step proprietary process, patented in 12 different countries. That's a lot of bull. We don't have any of that. We pretty much have a system that we use that we can adjust by quantity. So we got smart a couple of years ago and realized that not everybody needs all the steps in the process. Some people just need 2 or 3 of the steps. So we found a way to make that work for everybody. The simple thing is the wheel that we do. Discoveries, values-based communication, selling idea, peer review, flawless execution, and then conclusions. So pretty simple in terms of the pattern. You start at 12 o'clock, you go around, and then hopefully you start over again, because it should be never ending. It's never a finite wheel. Values-based communication is something that I'm going to touch on just a little bit today. And we can't do everything within one presentation. But values-based communication, we follow a study that was done by Dr. Milton Rokeach in 1973. There's lots of other people who have done psychographic segmentation, values-based communication. If you go to Environics, you can figure what tribe you belong in. I think there's 20 tribes around the world. But essentially what this talks about is 18 core human values that everybody has within them. And whether it's marketing, whether it's engineering, being able to understand the human values within your audience and what they respond to is a much more intrinsic way of figuring out how you can tell your story. So that's something that we use quite a bit. And again, I'm not going to go through that entire exercise, but that's one thing that sets us apart from a lot of other people selling communication. Okay. The best way for me to show you an example of what it is that we do is to show you one quick case study. And it's going to take probably about 5 or 6 minutes, so bear with me. Accountants. Accountants are about as exciting as engineers to the outside world. Less? Yes, okay. So I was trying to think of the hierarchy of, is it architects, engineers, lawyers, accountants? I'm not sure where it all fits. But accountants. Okay, does everybody know the different types of accountants? There's a CA, and then there's a CGA, and there's a CMA, and then there's a bunch of other things with CAs in it. I had no idea until these people came to us. And the CGA, Certified General Accountants, came to us and said, look, we have this problem. We've rebranded, yet we're still not getting our message across. And it seems like every time we come up with a campaign, the CMAs do a campaign that totally rips it off 6 months later, and they do it better than we did it, so everybody remembers their campaign. So that was a problem. So they showed us all this work, and we looked at it and said, yeah, okay, so you got your logo on it. But none of these pieces tell a story, none of them all work together, so we need to figure out what it is that you need to say. So we went through that brand exercise with them, the values-based communications, and we came up with this idea of seeing more than numbers. A really simple thing. It's not like it took a team of 100 people to figure that out. Somebody just spouted it out in a meeting. And it came up, and it got written down, and we kept looking at it, and we said, okay, that's a really strong platform for people to understand. It speaks to them in a way that they can easily comprehend. And I'm going to show this video.
One thing would be trust. You need a trustworthy person to be managing your business and your life. With money, it's too easy for things to get lost in the shuffle. So you really need someone who's trustworthy because you're putting a lot of faith in them.
And I rely on my accountant to help me find my way through the marketplace, to help me find opportunities that I may not see.
Everything should be part of the equation.
Today's economy is global, so productivity is something that people talk about a lot, but if they're not doing it, they're not delivering it, they're in trouble.
If you don't understand the numbers, risk goes up. End of story.
Usually what I want in my instinct is just to not do anything and just keep everything where it is, and it's not change anything, don't move.
Is there a time when we don't want to hear the numbers? There's lots of times, especially right now, I don't want to hear the numbers.
But numbers are crucial. If you don't have the numbers behind the business decision, you're going to make bad choices.
You can't really succeed in a business without taking risks. If you don't take risks, you don't grow.
I don't know many people that don't want to grow.
In an accountant, what I look for most are options.
I think it would be great to have an accountant that would collaborate.
To be a second pair of ears, to be a second pair of eyes.
He or she's got a specialty, and a lot is riding on advice that they give us.
A lot of my hard work is going into their hands.
One of the biggest problems we have when we talk about risk, we think of financial risk, we think of dollars and cents, we think of materials, we think of machinery. That risk, that's just nuts and bolts. It's the people that are behind the risk that you've got to really and always be cognizant of.
It's the people behind the numbers that's important.
Certified General Accountants see more than numbers. We see the impact and opportunity for business and the people who drive it. Certified General Accountants. We see more than numbers.
Okay. Can somebody tell me one topic in that video? What did they talk about?
Relationships.
Okay. Yep. What else? What else did they talk about?
Education.
Okay. What else? I heard somebody say a word, but I didn't know what it was. Collaboration. Risk. Yeah. Anything else? Trust. Last thing. Anybody got?
Numbers.
Numbers. Okay. People. People. So we had originally created a video very similar to this to show the people at CGA how we could structure the story. So we interviewed CGAs, we had the video camera on them. We took a lot of that stuff that's in that video verbatim from what they were telling us. When we put it all together and told the story to the people at CGA, the jaws dropped. And they were like, wow, I've never thought about the people side. I never thought about focusing on risk, collaboration, relationships, education. They talk about it all the time. They had no idea how to tell the story. So in talking with Theresa, Mary, and Ian, at the front of the room just before our session, one of the things was being able to tell a great story. Because when you tell that story, it doesn't end with your audience. If it's a really great story, your audience is then going to tell it to somebody else. So, one of the things we're going to try and work on today is figuring out what your story is. Within CGA, we had to do a whole bunch of stuff. So I showed you that first slide where they put their logo on everything, and it was all different. We went back to a very simple approach to say, okay, let's have one consistent look and feel to everything that you see. Newspaper ads on the left, banner ads, electronic. This was the airport billboard. We took over Union Station, doing station domination. Lots of people travel through there. We had to tell them. They didn't want to hear it, but it was true that the biggest audience they have is in downtown Toronto. So for the amount of money they had to spend, it made sense to put it there. So Union Station was a great place to get a lot of people coming through. TTC, no trains. So we took one message and took it far enough. You guys are laughing because you went through Union Station, or?
No, just the buses are pretty intense, so I'm still very eye-catching.
Yes, and that was part of it, was that scare people with the numbers so that they realized that most people don't like math. I don't know whether you guys are probably the exception. But most people get scared when it comes to math. Math is frightening. If you ever deal with a small business group, people that need to get financial software, they will tell you, I'm always scared of the numbers, I'm always scared of math, I was never good at it, I didn't get the math gene, my brother got that. They tell you that stuff all the time. So people are scared by numbers. So seeing more than numbers was a good thing for CGA. So that's what we did for them. That's a good example of taking something that people think as a boring profession, something that people really don't understand. I love Ian saying that his family still doesn't understand what he does. Same problem in my world. My dad still thinks I work in the photocopier room. It's okay. It's totally fine. He understands what my brother does because he's an engineer. But for me, it's kind of this weird thing between art and marketing and something else. Okay. So that's the end of CGA. BHAG. Does anybody know what this means? Okay. This is usually in, do you know? Okay. Okay. Big, hairy, audacious goal. Okay, so people with some experience, right, over there, somebody figured it out, props, right, I see that going. So big, hairy, audacious goal is usually what you try and get to in one of these sessions. We may not get there. So I don't want you to set false expectations that we're going to have this all figured out in an hour, because we won't. But a big, hairy, audacious goal is something that you want to try and strive for. And what you have to do to get there is challenge a lot of perceptions. In those sessions, nothing is wrong, right? There's no impossibilities. You cannot say, nah, you can't have the wah, wah, wah. You got to just put it all out there. So we're going to break out into some small groups later, and I don't want there to be any wah, wah, wah. I want there to be, okay, yeah, that's possible, write that down. Okay, so BHAG, we won't get to, but it's a good place to try and get to. And it's going to take more than this session to be able to do that. So, you have a problem. You need a solution. Jane talked about going to talk to those kids in the school, and engineers do what? They, right. So this should be easy for you guys, right? So it's a marketing problem, it's a voice problem, we don't know what our story is problem, but getting here should be easy because it's what you people do every day. You probably need some help doing it, but I'll see what I can do. This word, everybody talks about a brand, right? So, can somebody name a big brand? Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. All right, another big brand. Nike. Another one. McDonald's. McDonald's. Another brand that was in the news this week because they changed their logo and they're going to. Starbucks. Okay, so we get a lot of people that come to us and say, I want to be the Nike of whatever, or I want to be the Gap of this, or I want to be the Starbucks of this. And we say, okay, so what do you want to do? Well, I want a logo. Okay, so that's part of it. But one of the things that people don't understand is that when you talk about a brand, it's so much more than what the visual look of it is. It's about what you do. So branded, that CGA, the first slide I showed, that's branded. You stick your logo on it, it's branded. Being a brand is something different. That's figuring out what it is that you're going to stand for. So you can brand anything. Doesn't matter. Stick a logo on it, it's branded. But that does not make you this. And that's one of the things that you need to think about. So for us, at GRIP, what we do in our industry, attaching it to something. So I talked about 18 human values. Those are down here. But you also have to understand that you have to add value or create value. So you can have the best idea in the world. You can solve the best engineering or the biggest engineering problem ever. But if you have no way to show the value of that solution, then it's worth nothing. So one of the challenges you have in developing your brand is making sure that it has worth, making sure that it has value, and understanding how people perceive that and how it connects to them is an important part of this. So, action and words. So a brand. A brand is a lot about action. It's a little about words. So we're going to work on some words today, but while we're working on the words, you have to think about what actions those words convey. So I can stand up here and I can talk. I can talk in my monotone voice like this and make it very boring for all of you, or I can get a little more excited, a little more animated, and add a little bit of movement to it. So I'm adding action to the words. You're seeing me do it. You got to think about if you were reading this presentation, how would I put those action into those words as well? Your audience is going to see you in multiple forms. You have to think about how actions can live beyond just the words. And with words, I toss this in all the time. My partners always say, don't talk about that. People don't want to hear that. I think people do want to hear this because I have clients that come to me all the time. Not all the time. Once a year I have a client who comes to me. I had a client come to me a couple years ago and said, I've got this new thing, this new concept. It's called Pantheroo. And I said, yeah, that's great. What is Pantheroo? He said, well, it's stealthy like a panther, but hoppity like a kangaroo. It's Pantheroo. What does it do? I don't know yet, but it's Pantheroo. So he was doing some type of consulting, didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but he loved the name Pantheroo. So he had a proprietary name. So he had come up with this unique name that people are going to remember, and that meant that it was going to be his and his alone, but he had no everyday language to help explain what it was. So in putting words together to talk about who you are, what you do, proprietary is good, because sometimes you can own that space. But if you have to spend all your time explaining to people what the proprietary words mean, you've missed the boat. So a good balance of everyday and proprietary is a good thing. We see more than numbers, everyday language, yet we made it somewhat proprietary because we attached it to CTA. Okay, so something to think about. I'm going to go through these quick because I want to get to the exercises. Your audience. You need to think about who your audience is. Theresa talked about what she does at Monroe, and it's talking to engineers. So that's her audience. When you think about who your audience is, whether it's other engineers, whether it's your family, whether it's other people that need to understand what engineers do, understanding who these people are is important. Sometimes it's everybody. That class you went to, how old were those kids? 16, so from 16 to 80 could be your audience. Grocery store. Grocery store is a perfect example where you have to appeal to an 8-year-old who's looking for sugared cereals when they go shopping with their mom, to the 80-year-old who's just shopping for themselves as an empty nester. So 8 to 80 is a pretty big range. Now within that world, they can narrow the slices. And for you, I think it's important to understand who is this audience? Who are you trying to talk to about engineering? Is it everybody? Is it telling the whole world what engineers do? That Mary talked about the infrastructure, the fabric of we're behind all this stuff? Or is it more specifically somebody who's going to use your services? Somebody who really wants to engage engineers. So understanding that is important. Okay. Consensus and vanilla. So focus groups is part of my world. That's what I live with. I can't stand them. The worst things in the world. Because getting consensus on brilliant ideas usually means that people don't understand what it is. They don't understand it's a game changer. They may not understand how it all needs to go to create something new. And I had said to Ian and Mary and Theresa before we started NJane that in Canada, most people buy what they see, that they want to see. So the best example is cars. I go to the dealership and I see a car and I say, that's the car. And the salesperson says, okay, it's this car, and you say, well, actually it's this car, but I want it with different wheels and I want a different color. And the salesperson shows you the brochure and says, okay, see this little color swatch? It's going to be this color, and these wheels are going to be on that car. And the first thing that the person will say is, do you have that car here? Can I see it? No, we don't have it. Oh. Is there somewhere close by that I can see that car in that color with those wheels? Maybe. Canadians like to see it before they buy it. Americans, just right across the border, Americans are like, that color? Those wheels on that car? Sign me up. They take it. They can envision how it's going to go. But Canadians like to see something. So in focus groups, a lot of times if you show them something they've never seen before, the first thing they say is, no, I don't know. I've seen something like that. And what ends up happening is it gets watered down, watered down, watered down, and you end up with vanilla. And that means that you're on the shelf with everybody else telling the same story in the same flavor of vanilla. So remember that sometimes consensus, overall consensus, can be a bad thing. So this conference talked about it's okay to disagree, it's okay to challenge, it's okay to do things. That's a good thing. Having everybody agree sometimes is a bad thing. Sometimes you need to spearhead the movement and figure out what it is that you're going to talk about. Okay. Any challenges yet? Anybody want to tell me I'm crazy? Anybody want to say that's complete BS? Yes? Nobody? Okay. Have I lost anybody yet?
Just later.
Later? Okay. I'm up for a fight, so it's good. Perception and change. So we're going to get quickly to the exercises. And it's going to be hard because we're not in tables, but we're going to try and do it by rows. So we'll figure that out in a minute. But perception. There's a perception of engineers out there. And you probably need to change it in some way. You may say, I love the perception of engineers, but we need to change the way we talk about what that perception is. So somewhere between what the perception is and some form of change, that's what kind of fuel you need to add to your product. And changing perceptions is hard. I will tell you that it's one of the hardest things for people to do. People are conditioned. So when you start telling them something, so back to actions and words, you tell people that, oh, we're not that anymore, we're now this, the first thing they do is get suspect. They kind of look at you like, I don't know, because I know you as this, I don't know if you're that. So telling them one thing is the start, but acting that way is the biggest part. Actions speak louder than words. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Million's good. Right? So being able to have people remember visually what it is that you talked about or spoke about is worth 1,000 words. And actions speak more than that, so actions are worth 1,000,000. Okay, so remember that. So let's start seeding the first exercise. I think what I'm going to do is just do four groups. 4 groups is probably easily. You don't have to move, you don't have to do anything yet. But what we're going to do, you know what, it's going to be too big. We're going to do 6 groups. We're going to make these 2 rows, then the next 2 rows, then the last 2 rows, and the same on this side. The last 2 rows, these 2 rows, these 2 rows work together. And I'm going to ask Mary and Theresa and Ian to sort of walk around to the groups. You don't need to do anything yet. I'm going to show you kind of what we're looking to do. I need somebody within each one of those groups to have a blank piece of paper, one that can get passed around. So a blank piece of paper is important. This is a really complex engineering challenge, right? You have a blank piece of paper and something to write on, and everybody's like, I don't have that. I don't know where I'm going to get that. Okay, so the first part of this exercise is going to be for you within your groups to figure out who you are. Not individually, but who engineers are. Right? And what am I looking to get out of that? So here's where I make some horrible assumptions and complete sweeping generalizations. Engineers are the most excellent university partners. Right? Yes? Engineers are people that make bridges. Right? That's something that people talk about. Engineers are geeks with scientific calculators. Right? The HP. Right? Engineers are ring-wearing dream realizers. Yes, maybe. I don't have this. Not part of the secret society. Smart people who figure stuff out. Okay, so now I'm moving. What did I start with? What was the first one? Partiers. What was the second one? Third one? Ring-wearing dream realizers. Smart people who figure stuff out. And the last one, adaptive problem solvers and social conscience. Wow, you guys are great. So those are good examples of who are you. Okay, so I'm going to ask for 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows. Try and work together. What I want you to do within 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Hello, everybody.
You guys write it down, sort of similar to the ones I just showed you. And write it down on that one piece of paper. Right?
The history of engineering.
History of engineering. Okay. Next group.
We had serving people for public safety, and the thing stopping us was that it was a narrow focus and generic.
Okay. Group at the back.
Okay, we have actually quite similar to that one. A person who keeps safety and environment as paramount, and some of the things that we have issues is our legacy. Some of the other things was lack of knowledge about what we do, no common message, a diversity of sub-skills, disciplines, and
Communication.
Association with us when things go wrong. So we only come up when
there's bad things.
There's bad things.
Okay. This group at the back.
Yes. So the problem was that there's a feeling of being different, of a lack of awareness, and the one thing that's preventing us is that because there's a lot of exclusiveness.
Okay. All right. Next group in the middle.
We also had a big problem with the exclusiveness issue. And the other thing that was blocking us was that feeling of exclusiveness doesn't allow us to collaborate effectively with other disciplines on the biggest problems.
Okay. Last group here.
Sure. So we inherited the consensus that engineers are practical innovators who solve real-world problems. We tweaked that a little bit to add that they solve real-world problems to benefit humanity. I think we think that the real drop that kind of made us reach that conclusion was that prevent us from reaching that conclusion, are that the public perception of engineering doesn't necessarily have too much of a focus on ethics, or at least it's not such a stressed kind of responsible factor. And a root cause of that was suggested was the industry heavily being informed on big industry being focused on profit, and not necessarily social conscience.
Okay. All right, so that's good. I'm going to try and do a 2-minute wrap up. You guys can sit because the door's already open and get you guys out. So I'm going to do quick stuff. So lots of good stuff. Legacy, history, collaboration, exclusivity, ethics. One of the things you have to understand about your profession is that you have history. So you're going to have to live with it, you're going to have to deal with it. The second part that you have to come to grips with is that engineering is a business. It's not a hobby. If it was a hobby, nobody would make money at it and nobody would live. So there's an important reason why engineering exists. And in our capitalist society, maybe too much so, there is a focus on monetizing solutions. So you need to find a balance, right? If it was a hobby, it would be great to do, but making a living at it would be challenging. Helping others with it is difficult as well because you may not reach the biggest audience. So understanding that engineering as a business is important. That history you have and you cannot change that history, it exists. So 2 words. So out of all the things that you guys talked about, Jane and I had a phone conversation last week, and she, in her ramble. I don't know what else to call it. She said these two words, because I asked her, what do you want out of this? She said, I just want people to think of engineers as, people that go beyond bridges. It's not about that. And I wrote it down on my piece of paper, and I loved it because bridge is a noun. Everybody knows what that is. The verb part of bridges is make a difference between two groups, smaller or less significant. And I love the idea of the history is about this, because most lay people, that's what they think of when they think of engineers. What are those rings made out of? I'm not supposed to know, right? So that was my way to find out. Bridges is something that people associate with the history of engineers. What you've been talking about in terms of ethics and collaboration is building bridges figuratively, not literally. So in 2 words, all the words that you guys put out there, I thought there was something to this notion of beyond bridges. And it talks about a future state. It talks about where you can go, which I thought was really great. So, we've done an hour and you're all going, yeah, okay, understand it all, got it. The person at the back there was open the door and saying, get out. I'm going to take 2 slides. You may have had $1 million idea today, but do you remember what I said, value and values? That $1 million is worth nothing if you can't execute it. When I was a kid growing up, it used to be possession was 9/10 of the law. If I stole it from my brother and I had it, it was mine. Now, it's about execution. If you can't execute your idea, if you can't execute the thoughts that you had in this room or move it to the next level, your $1 million is worth nothing. And the last part is this equation. Engineers, equations, it's perfect. H equals R over E. Anybody have an idea what this means? Happiness equals reality over expectations. So whether it's your customers, whether it's you in your personal life, whether it's what you do, happiness is a balance between the reality and the experience and what those expectations are. Your personal life?
You're zero.
Yeah. Because, wait a minute, because ignorance is bliss and knowledge is power. Okay. That's the end of it. Thank you, everybody. Wait.
No. Okay, just
kidding.
poised.
Just signaling
okay,
to get
this will
out.
be really quick. I just want to thank all of you for coming, and especially thank our guests, Ian and Mary and Theresa, for being here today. This has been a really interesting experience. I'm sure all of you have either tried to communicate engineering to your Aunt Matilda at Christmas dinner, or you've tried to talk to a dean, or you are a dean trying to communicate to students. And this is all really, really useful information, I think, for us to help think about what people are perceiving us as and how we can more clearly communicate what we really are. Because that's, I think, what we all really want, is people to understand us for what we are and what value we bring to society. So I'll leave you with that. I think there's a career fair happening now downstairs. So go to that, start to meet people from industry, sponsors, all of that. And speakers will be here. If you've got questions, I'll be here. That's all I've got. So thank you.